Is the Daniel Jones soap opera coming to an end? Should the Giants trade out of round one? And what free agents do we need to be talking about besides Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley that we're currently not talking about? All that and more coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina. Happy Tuesday to everybody. We are back with another episode. We're still 5 days a week because we're gearing up for free agency, and there should be some news hopefully coming down the pipe in the coming days. Today, Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern, the deadline for teams to apply the franchise or transition tag, and of course, a big deadline date for the New York Giants, assuming that they can avoid having to use the tag on quarterback Daniel Jones and save it instead for running back Saquon Barkley. So actually, that's the first thing we're going to talk about on today's show. Is the Daniel Jones contract saga about to come to an end? We know the deadline, like I said, is coming up. But let's talk a little bit more about the latest developments that happened since I last recorded it. And I know some of you are probably sick of it. You're probably like, you know what? When it's done, just wake me up. I mean, I feel the same way, but it is my duty to give you guys and gals the latest. Here's what we know so far. The NFL Network's Mike Garafolo reported that Jones reps had planned to travel to New Jersey to continue face-to-face discussions. That travel was supposed to take place Monday, but that's a good sign. And the reason why that is a good sign is because if they're making the trip out to New Jersey from, I think their headquarters is in California, that must mean they're getting close. And sure enough, Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated reported that they have, quote unquote, closed the financial gap significantly, end of quote. And he confirmed also that the agents and the Giants were supposed to meet on Monday. And they're racing against the clock now. So what does that mean for where they're at with the contract negotiations? This is just my guess. All right. I suspect they have an idea how many years. They have an idea how much total. What they are probably trying to iron out, and these are, minor details, but they're important, is the distribution of the money. So in other words, we have heard reports that Daniel is looking for 40 to 45 million a year. If he ends up getting that, a big if, by the way, that doesn't mean that it is a pure 40 to 45 million per year. That could be with all incentives and escalators and contract triggers in it. So for example, Daniel could get 1 year, 37.5 million. And if he meets some not likely to be earned incentives, maybe that pushes it up to 40 plus million. So the idea here is if and when this deal does get done, and I have a feeling it's going to get done, the optimism that Joe Shane expressed, the fact that the agents are out in New Jersey trying to wrap things up is a good sign. There's a lot of positive signs pointing towards this deal potentially getting done in time for the franchise tag to go to Saquon Barkley. So, I think it's important that we wait until the entire package, all the numbers come out before we jump to any conclusions. I know there's going to be people, they'll probably see Daniel Jones sign for 40 plus million and they'll go, why? And folks, trust me when I say this, wait until all the numbers come out. I will break the contract down as soon as I get it. I'll explain it to you. I'll probably do an article on Giants Country explaining it and breaking it all down. The important thing to know is that if they can avoid using the franchise tag on Daniel Jones, that means good news. The first year of the contract is not going to be whatever the APY is. All right. So in other words, if the APY is reported to be 40 million a year, first year of the contract won't be that. I can tell you that right now. It'll probably be maybe half of 32 million, because the first year of all new contracts is generally less. And the reason for that is because teams pump a lot of cash up front to the player once he signs a contract in the form of a signing bonus. If there's a roster bonus involved, they'll do that. So, again, don't panic if the numbers come out and they sound like, oh my God, Daniel's getting way more than he should be getting. Because like I said, once we break it down and we see what the incentives are, the likely to be earned, the not likely to be earned, these are the little details that I suspect the Giants and Daniel's agents are trying to iron out, because, I don't think this contract is necessarily going to be backloaded. I think they're going to try and balance it out so that Daniel can make a nice little chunk of change. And I'm very interested to see how it matches up with what the franchise tag would be for quarterbacks over the next couple of years. So Over the Cap came out actually with their projections for franchise tags next year. And for a quarterback, it's going to jump up to 41.768 million. All right. This year it's 32.416. Next year it's going to jump up to 41.768. So you would think logic would dictate that within the first couple of years of that contract, Daniel Jones is probably going to make the equivalent of the sum of 32.4 and 41.7 million. That is, once that is assuming that the contract gets done, I should say. So we'll keep an eye on that for you. We'll break everything down once we get the numbers. So I'm holding off on doing a mock draft. I know I said I would do a mock draft this week, but I'm kind of holding off because today is a big day. And if we get some news that Daniel has signed, then I will come back with another podcast for you, an emergency podcast, and we'll break everything down as best as possible. All right. Coming up next, should the Giants trade out of the first round? I have some thoughts about it. I'm going to share them with you right after this. Hey, football fans, the NFL season might be over, but the NBA season is at its midpoint, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 if their first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to the spread and more. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey, Giant fans, thanks so much for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen every day. For your second listen, make that the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez provide in-depth coverage of the biggest NFL draft prospects with deep dives into the sleepers and hidden gems that can change your favorite NFL franchise. Find Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And before I get into this next segment about should the Giants trade out of the first round, and I'll explain why I'm asking this question, just want to mention real quick that I am out of questions. I know you guys had sent in a bunch of questions to be answered either on the podcast or on Giants Country. I did a couple of mailbags over the weekend. So if you haven't heard your question, check out Giants Country. That's where, I answered a bunch of them. So I have plenty of room for more questions. If you want to send them in, you can either tweet them to me at Patricia_Traina. You can make sure you use the hashtag, by the way, AskPTrain. If you sent them to me on Instagram, and I think actually I have a question on Instagram that was sent to me. I'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure somebody asked me a question now that I think about it. Yeah, somebody did. And actually, I'll answer that question because it did come in through Instagram. But anyway, my Instagram account is at Patty Traina, PATTITRAINA. Give me a follow on Instagram because I'll be bringing you video, audio clips, factoids, all kinds of cool stuff. In addition to the occasional Q&A, which I do over there on Instagram. Let's get to the next business at hand. And that is, should the Giants trade out of round one? Now, a little background on this question. The question actually came up when I was talking with a colleague last week. And this colleague was convinced that the Giants would trade out of the first round. And my argument was, it's too soon to say. And the reason I say that is because draft boards are not finalized yet, number one, because you still have to go through pro days. Number two, you still got to go through free agency and kind of get a feel for, how things are going to shape up. I mean, teams say that they take the best player available regardless of position, but we all know that's not really true. If a team has a Patrick Mahomes, they're probably not going to draft in the first round another quarterback, despite what they might say. So should the Giants trade out of the first round? And my colleague was of the opinion that they should look to get some additional picks in the second round in exchange for trading out of the first round. I, for one, am not in favor of that. And the reason why I'm not in favor of that is because one thing we have seen quite often in the draft is that suddenly there are runs on positions. And just in kind of running some mock drafts through simulators and whatnot, one of my biggest concerns is that there's going to be a run on cornerbacks. And spoiler alert, when I do my mock draft, whether, later this week or whenever it might be, I'm going cornerback in round one. I'm telling you that right now. And I've said that because Adoree Jackson is entering the final year of his deal. And he only has one interception to his name, not a whole lot of big plays. I'm not convinced Aaron Robinson is the long-term answer. I believe the Giants could use two quality cornerbacks on their team. This is a class that is deep in cornerbacks. So if you're going to restock that position, this is the year to do it. And that might mean even double dipping, getting a first rounder and then maybe a second rounder or a third rounder. But if I could see the Giants potentially double dipping at cornerback because the depth just wasn't solid. So for that reason, if I'm the Giants who are drafting 25th, I'm probably taking a cornerback at that spot. Unless, not even unless. I mean, I know offensive line, center is a need. Receiver is definitely a need. But I think you can get those positions later in the draft. So, there'd have to be something really, really funky to happen. A blue chip prospect tumbles down to 25. Otherwise, again, if I'm the Giants, I'm going with cornerback. And I'm not even thinking about trading down. Now, the advantage to trading down is simple. You trade out of the first round, your cap hit becomes a little lower. What you have to pay for the players. So right now, I'm going to look this up real quick. The Giants will have to pay $11.404 million to their rookie pool, but only $3.145 million is going to be new money. All right. So what that basically means is, even though the rookie pool in total is going to cost them $11.4 million, there's a formula that Over the Cap uses. Basically, it's rookie pool minus 750,000 times the number of picks. And that's how they calculate the effective cap space. So with rookie contracts for the draft picks, the signing bonus hits the salary cap, the top 51, and the total cap value or the rest of it, not necessarily so. So for example, let's take, let me see if I could give you an example here. Let's take, say the Giants pick number 245. That rookie will have a total value of 3.929 million with a signing bonus of 89.468. The prorated part of that signing bonus, that 89.468, is if that comes to $22,367. That hits the top 51, regardless. But the cap number, the total cap number, which is 750 base salary, that part will probably not hit the top 51. So I don't know if that makes sense, but again, the prorated signing bonus does hit the top 51 for the draft class. The base salary, if it's outside of the top 51, does not. So that's why the effective cap space for the Giants is so much less, about 8 million plus less than the total cap space that is needed for the rookie class. So hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, just pop a question on YouTube under the video or send me a question. I'll try and explain it a little bit better, maybe illustrate it a little bit better for you. But just another little nuance of the salary cap you need to keep in mind. So the whole point that I'm trying to make is the Giants don't save a whole lot of money if they trade out of the first round. Yeah, they get an extra draft pick. Great. But I don't think it's worth it. I mean, if there's going to be a potential run on cornerbacks and you need cornerbacks, just stay put and take the best available at the time you're picking. That's how I see it. So yeah, I don't agree with trading out of the first round as of right now. Now, if they get an offer they can't refuse, that's another story. You know, if it's, I don't know, a first round pick next year and a second round pick this year, then sure, why not? Then you got to think about it. But right now, I would say it doesn't make sense. All right. Before I get to segment 3, which is a look at what free agents we're not talking about that we need to, I do want to answer this question that came in from Bill W., who wants to know, Tyrod Taylor as the starter. Why is no one entertaining that idea? Save a ton of money to invest in O-line, receiver, quarterback. I think Tyrod Taylor would do fine with a starter for way cheaper. All right, Bill, thanks for the question. The reason why no one is entertaining that idea is because Tyrod Taylor, we don't know that he would necessarily be an upgrade over Daniel Jones. And, you know, you say he would be way cheaper. Again, if Daniel signs a new deal, which hopefully by the time this podcast airs and some of you hear it, hopefully they will have agreed to terms on a new deal because that deadline is coming up. Like I said, the first year is going to be a lot cheaper than Tyrod Taylor. So Bill, it doesn't work out cheaper. It really doesn't. The answer is to sign Daniel to a long-term deal, 4 or 5 years, whatever it might be. The first year will be low. It'll be probably, if I had to take a wild guess, I would say it would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 or 15 million, which is not too bad for a starting quarterback. You will still have plenty of money to use to sign, you know, an offensive lineman if you want to sign a linebacker if you want to. And quite honestly, I don't think they're going to sign an offensive lineman. I'd be surprised. I think what they're going to probably look to do is maybe add through the draft. Because Joe Shane last week at the Combine mentioned that they have some competition that they could run at center. You know, he mentioned Ben Bredesen. You know, if they bring back one or both of Gates and Feliciano, they could do that. I think they draft a center, a pure center. So, yeah, I think if they're going to sign anybody, you know, veteran-wise, you're probably looking at maybe a safety. You're probably looking at an interior defensive lineman and an inside linebacker. Those would be my guesses as to where they would need to upgrade. You're not going to spend crazy on upgrading the roster because I think Joe Shane wants to do it via the draft. So I hope that answers your question, Bill. All right. Speaking of which, we mentioned some free agents. We're going to talk about other free agents that we're not talking about currently, but we need to be talking about after Daniel and Saquon are taken care of. So don't go anywhere. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And during the break, a couple of tiny little pieces of news. As I'm recording this podcast, it is Monday night. Mike Garafolo of the NFL Network weighed in and he said that nothing was likely to happen Monday night, which obviously, by the time you're hearing this, it's Tuesday on the East Coast, and no news is good news, as they say. But they're going to keep meeting. And it looks like this is going to go down to the wire. So again, that soap opera hopefully will come to an end one way or another as of tomorrow. Now, Garofalo also reported that Joe Schoen met briefly with Saquon Barkley's representatives, and it was a positive meeting. So things hopefully going in the right direction to where they don't have to use the franchise tag on either of them. And they could get both of those guys in under, maybe half of what their first year, what their APY would normally be, or what the tag would be. So for Saquon, if they could get him his first year's number at about, 5-6 million as opposed to 10 million, that would be a plus. Daniel, as I mentioned, if they could get him from instead of 32 million down to about 15-16 million, that would be a plus. So stay tuned, folks. Tomorrow is going to be the day. Again, as soon as I have any kind of news, I will hop on, do an emergency podcast. And who knows, we might even do a live show. I know I've been in touch with Tana and Bad Dog. And if we need to, we might even do a live show. So we're supposed to do a live show this week, actually. But let's see how it plays out. Things are kind of up in the air. But once I know, I will let you guys and gals know. All right. Let's talk now about free agents, Giants free agents that we're not talking about, but we need to. And I have identified really 4 guys that I want to mention and what I think is going to happen with them. And I kind of touched on a couple of them before. Gates or Feliciano, I think one, not both, but one of those guys is coming back. And I still have a feeling it's going to be Feliciano. Now I'm going to check in on that, towards the end of the week, see where things are at, see if I can find out anything to pass along to you. But I just don't think both of those guys are going to be back. I'd be very, very surprised if that happens. Another guy that really hasn't been talked about a whole lot is Julian Love. And Julian Love, I get the impression that they're moving on from him. I think I saw something where the Giants were hoping to do between 5 and 7 million. I think that's the numbers I saw. And Julian, from what I gather, is looking to do closer to the franchise tag amount per year for a safety, which I think for a safety is, let me take a look at that real quick. For safety, the franchise tag is about 14.46. The transition tag is 11.8. So I think from what I remember, I think Julian was said to be looking somewhere between 8 and 10, according to a report. He's not going to get between 8 and 10 from the Giants. Joe Schoen last week spoke about how he's anticipating some veteran safeties to shake free from other teams. That to me told me that they're probably going to move on from Julian, that right now they're just so far apart in reaching a deal with him. 2 other guys that I think they're going to bring back, and they're both on the defensive side of the ball. And I think they should be able to get these guys relatively inexpensively. And that would be edge rusher Jihad Ward, who is an unrestricted free agent, and Gerard Davis, linebacker. Now, I do think the Giants are going to try to upgrade at linebacker. They're going to have Darian Beavers back, hopefully, from his ACL injury. They liked what they saw from Gerard Davis. I don't think they stand pat, though, at the position. I do think they try to add to that spot. I don't think it's going to be a Tremaine Edmonds. I don't think it's going to be a really big splash of a signing. I know a lot of Giant fans would like a Tremaine Edmonds. I'm not so sure that that's what they do there. So I'm curious to see what actually happens, but that's the vibe I'm kind of getting regarding that position. And I mentioned Jihad Ward. Jihad Ward provided versatility on the defensive line and at outside linebacker. But in no way, shape, or form, if the Giants bring him back, should they call it a day. They still need more interior defensive line help. They still need some more firepower at outside linebacker. So I don't think if they bring those guys back, that they call it a day. I really don't. Another guy, I'm curious to see if they bring this guy back, is punter Jamie Gillian. Has a strong leg, lacks touch, but I think if they bring Gillian back, it'll be on a 1-year deal. And I think they got to get competition for him. I really do. I mean, last year he didn't have competition, and I thought that was a big mistake, because if you're trying to create competition up and down the roster and you have a position where there's no competition, nobody really pushing you, that's not good. So I could see them bringing him back on a short-term deal. Of the receivers, Richie James, Sterling Shepard, and Darius Slayton. I know some people said, well, gee, why don't they just bring back Slayton back? I'm not sure Slayton gets brought back. I think Slayton's going to get a big deal, a sizable deal in what is still a weak free agent class for receivers. And I just don't see the Giants matching that. Now, would they bring back Richie James? I am 50-50 on that. I don't have a feeling one way or another. I could see where it might make sense, but I could also see where it makes more sense to maybe look for an upgrade. So really, those are the guys that I think we need to be talking about. I think over the last several weeks, we've all been consumed by the Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley contract talks, rightfully so. They're the two biggest free agents that the Giants have. But there are other guys that need to be dealt with as far as their contracts go. And again, I don't expect Joe Shane to go crazy. You might see a lot of, veteran 1-year deals to kind of be placeholders until some of the young talent that they might be planning to add is up to speed. So, roster building season, it's about to get underway, folks. We're counting down. March 15th is the start of free agency. Next week, a week from yesterday, is the start of the legal tampering period. So going to be busy, busy, busy. We will have everything you need to know here on the Locked On Giants podcast. All right. Again, before we say goodbye, we're going to see what happens with any news with Daniel Jones. I will have an update for you just as soon as I can. If we get breaking news where he signs, I'm going to see if I can grab Tana and Dog and see if we can't do our live stream on a Tuesday night as opposed to waiting until Thursday. Just keep it here at the Locked On Giants podcast, and I will get you everything you need to know as it breaks. Thanks so much for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. We will see you next time, Giants fans.